So let's continue with the last keynote before the lunch break. And again on security, of course, because how to build end-to-end secure devices. He's the CEO of Sodac, implementing our third layer. Do we need it, he asked us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Willem Smeenk. Yay! You got at least 2 fans.
Is this the remote here? Yeah. All right, welcome for everyone that stayed. I think security may be a topic that is not completely in everybody's interest, but well, it should be. My name is Willem Smeenk. I'm of Sodac. First start up with a couple of things about us. We're a developer of Arduino-compatible hardware and the related embedded software. So in the IoT domain, where we're all in now, we started in 2013, and in 2014, February, so that's almost 4 years ago now, we first discovered LoRa. We sell our stuff through our web shop. That's enough commercial stuff. We make custom IoT hardware and software developments, and we do IoT projects. The first, well, we're based in Hilversum. That's only 20 kilometers outside Amsterdam. And we're now with a team of 12. Yeah, come on, click to the next stage. The first product that we launched commercially was the Sodac 1. And in fact, we did it's a small form factor board. We did the version 3 launch yesterday of this board. It's, again, Arduino-compatible board, small form factor SMD21 microcontroller with the microchip RN2483 module on board. It has a U-Blocks GPS. So contrary to what the previous speaker said, is that you can just do your geolocation with LoRa. Of course, that works, but we still believe that having a GPS on board gives you somewhat better accuracy. And our boards all run on solar and LiPo batteries. So yesterday we announced the latest version of the board, version 3. So it's really small. I'll show it to you. This is a tiny little LoRa GPS tracking device. Yes. So after we launched this, Microchip came to us and they said, it's a really nice board, but we have something different in mind. Can you develop a new board for us? And that new board is the Sodac Explorer. You must have seen it around. Self-contained little device. Again, Arduino compatible. We use the same microcontroller, but this is from the wish list that Microchip gave us. It's the same SMD21. Same LoRa microcontroller model that Microchip provides, embedded PCB antenna. It actually radiates really well. We were surprised about its radio performance. Little rechargeable LiPo cell on board. But Microchip asked us to add 2 features to the board. The first important feature they asked us to add was a Bluetooth module. When they came up with this design, they already realized that for certain things you might want to have a different channel of communication to your device, not just limiting yourself to LoRa. But if you have Bluetooth, you could do over-the-air updates quite easy over this secondary channel. To do firmware updates, a requirement often is that you have some flash to store this data. So they asked us to put flash on board. And they asked us to put the ATAC 508 secure element on board. At first, we didn't quite realize why they asked us to put this secure element there. And it took a while before this really caught on, that people started to realize that, in fact, to have a cryptographic coprocessor on your board, you might be able to solve all the security issues that ever may occur. So my talk is about security in LoRa and how we can make it better. This is because security is all over the news. This is just a couple of screenshots that I got from my Twitter and LinkedIn and whatever the streams of information I'm getting in. It's all about security. It's all about the risks that we all have. And everybody is scared for the mass rollout of IoT devices because all of these security risks. So what are these security threats? We tend to classify the security threats in 3 different sections. First of all, eavesdropping. Listening on the radio waves, what information is getting passed, breaking into it, stealing the information. If you can intercept the payload, if you can decode the payload, you can abuse the payload. So that's the #1 threat in any wireless networking technology. The second threat that we have is impersonation. If you make a device that sends data. If somebody steals or hacks into your device, takes the device over and starts doing totally different things, or taking the LoRa keys in a LoRa scenario, put it in a different device, it could be that you think your device is there. It's take, for instance, an asset tracking device. If you put an asset tracking device on your asset, you may think your asset is still in the place where you left it, but somebody else may have loaded the LoRa keys on another device, and then your asset is not in place. They've stolen your asset and just left the dummy in place. So that's impersonation. Is it really my device that sends the data? We should keep asking ourselves that question all the time. The third threat is the denial of service. Denial of service is all over the news. It's the distributed DOS attacks on the internet everywhere. It's a separate topic. I'm not going to go into this. Denial of service, that's a totally different topic altogether. For me, most important two issues to address here are the impersonation and the eavesdropping. LoRa has been designed with security in mind. It's not that they didn't think about security when they made the standard. The LoRa security model is built up by, first of all, we have the device. The device communicates over the LoRa wireless network to a gateway. The gateway then communicates over an IP network to a network server, and the network server finally delivers the data to an application server. So on the left side of the picture, you see the LoRa wireless network. On the right side of the picture, you see an IP network where the final message delivery takes place. Now, in this design, they defined two different security mechanisms. The ones that are familiar with LoRa must know these terms, because you have to enter these keys when you start sending your messages. The first one defined is the network session key. The network session key actually encrypts the message that comes from your device to the network server. And a second encryption layer is put on top of that, whereby the actual payload that you're sending is encrypted with the application session key for delivery to the application server. So all in all, quite an interesting concept whereby you separate your network encryption from your application encryption. Pretty good idea, but there are some flaws there. Why is it not moving to the next? The LoRaWAN security is based on what we originally found in Zigbee, so 802.15.4. It has AES 128 encryption. There's not much wrong with it. You could use a stronger encryption, but is it really that relevant for these small devices? And then the enhancement were the two keys that we just described, the application session key and the network session key. Joining the network in LoRa can be done over two different methods, over-the-air activation and activation by personalization. The over-the-air activation is way more secure than the ABP is. Still, we see that a lot of people are still using ABP. So to keep in mind, do we really want to use ABP only, or should we shift over to over-the-air activation? That's an important question you should ask yourself if you're security concerned. But the weakness is that these security keys are symmetric keys. The key is known at the device, and the key is known at the network server. So the key can be compromised in two different places. And that's a huge security risk. That's why we see in most other forms of communication, we've all switched over to asymmetric keys. So we can ask ourselves, why is LoRa still sticking to these symmetric keys? The clicker is not really... So there we are. So the LoRa encryption in practice is, yes, we are using these network session and application session keys, but what we typically find is that most of the operators combine the network layer and the application layer into one. It's hardly any implementation of LoRa whereby the actual network and application key separation, or the two different layers, are targeting at two different machines. Here the Things Network or KPN or LoRaWAN or any of the big operators, they all combine the network and the application layer into one machine. And then finally that one machine that receives the data, decrypts the data and sends the unencrypted data to an application dashboard platform, you name it. We've got My Devices here. We got All Things Talk from Belgium here. Those are all platforms that receive the data from the network application server in its unencrypted state. There's a lot of concern by people that say, well, it's my data that I sent over my LoRa network. Well, not over a public LoRa network. The data lands on the server, the Things Network or anywhere. So anybody that has access to these services can actually see my data in the plane. Most people don't want that, but to get to the point where the application session key is used all the way to your platform is not implemented because of the difficulties that people have implementing this. It's mainly because the whole joining process then needs to be integrated in your application platform. So this is what you typically see. Now, how can we solve this? Oh, no, first of all, in any encryption scenario, or in any communication scenario, the weakest link is the wireless. The wireless, since LoRa is an open standard, it's all well documented. You can buy a gateway for next to nothing. The Things Network just released their gateways. They cost only a few $100s. So putting up a gateway to start eavesdropping, to start listening on the signal and decoding the signal is quite easy. So the biggest concern that we all should have is if anybody can listen on the network, if anybody can or if the keys are compromised so that anybody can decode what is going on over the wireless network, our information is open to them. So that's the weakest part. Somewhere further down through the network, you could say the gateway is on a private network, an encrypted tunnel to the server, etc. So I don't see much of a threat in the second part, but in the radio part, I'm definitely seeing potential issues. There's been some research done by a company called 451 Research. They went out and they checked out what are the experts in the field, what are the biggest concerns that they have about security in IoT. And what I thought was interesting is that 63% of the people responded that the physical device, the physical endpoint, is where they fear that the greatest security risk takes place. There is this mousetrap that was in some previous presentations. There was a university in Belgium that took the mousetrap apart, hacked the mousetrap, got into it, retrieved the keys, and actually showed that indeed this should be one of our biggest concerns, the physical security of our endpoint. If we can break into the endpoint, we can probably eavesdrop on the communication that takes place between the microcontroller and the LoRa module. Because somewhere in time, the microcontroller sends the keys to the LoRa module. And if you can listen on that interface, just by putting some probes on there, you could retrieve those keys. So eavesdropping on the UART interface is the prime risk that we have with the LoRa devices that we have. Other things, you could probably try to decode the non-volatile memory and find the keys there. Or you could decode the embedded software and find the keys there. All these things have been done and are apparently quite easy to do. So how can you protect your end device against these physical break-ins? When the keys fall in the wrong hands, of course, then they can start decoding your message and communication is no longer secure. So a solution is we rolled out some devices. These were actually ear tags that we put on cows. They're fully casted in epoxy, so there is no physical access to the device. So you cannot get access to the UART or can access to the microcontroller or the embedded software. So you cannot steal the keys from this. So one method of doing it is just hard potting it in epoxy. For many situations, that might not be a practical solution. So there's other things that we would like to explore. Again, in this scenario of breaking into the device, how did the guys steal the keys from the mousetrap? I believe what they did is they just listened on the UART interface, and it turned out that most of the devices, most of the LoRa application that I have seen rolled out, they are all using the standard practice of sending the network session key and the application session key to the LoRa module at every reboot. So at the start of the program, you send the keys to the module, and the keys start working from the moment in time. That's not such a good practice, because that means that you only have to reboot the device, listen on the UART, and 5 seconds later you've stolen the keys. So a better way for, let's say the example here is the microchip module, is to send the keys to the device only once and store the keys on the LoRa module. At least you have solved the possibility of people breaking in, listening on the UART and stealing the keys. If you only do this in a controlled environment, for instance, only in your own lab before you send the devices out, then you've solved 90% of the eavesdropping of keys of the device. But that's not just only one risk. It's not just the risk of stealing the keys when they're already in the device. How do we get these keys? Typically, the keys are sent via some sort of a channel. Often, you just go online at the Things Network. Online, you retrieve your keys, you copy and paste, and you paste it into the device, and then the keys are there. So the keys may even be hijacked before you load them on the device. And there's an even bigger risk because you don't even know that somebody has stolen your keys, and somebody could be listening on the radio and decode your messages. And yeah, what's the point? So one of the proposed scenarios is to send the keys in a different way to the device. We've been working with a security company called Giesecke de Vriend, and they said if the keys are in a secure key store, you can use the internet from your smartphone to retrieve the keys over a secure channel, and then using Bluetooth to securely sending them to the device, and then nobody will ever have seen the keys. So if this is your controlled environment, you use your phone and you load the keys on your LoRa device. I've got a little video here. I hope I can play that video. Let me see. No, is there a way to activate this? Well, I don't think I can show the video, but we're giving a demo here live, whereby we have the device that connects to the LoRa board over Bluetooth and sends the keys over Bluetooth. So this is scenario one. So that is the reason why Microchip asked us to put Bluetooth on board, so that we can make that secure channel for setting the keys in the device and then communicate with LoRa from that point on. Yeah. I'm not sure. The other thing that in this list that I picked out that to me is a big security risk is, what about the key store? What about the keys that somebody generated for these devices? They're all stored in one secure environment. What if somebody hacks a key store and steals all the keys? We see all the major IT companies being hacked some stage in their life. We see sites like LinkedIn and Twitter, etc., being hacked at some stage. So if somebody breaks into the key store and steals a set of keys, that means that all these devices are compromised. So that personally I see as a much greater risk. If the keystone gets compromised, the LoRa keys are no longer secure. And the problem with the LoRa protocol is that there is no way, using the LoRa communication infrastructure, to send new keys to a device. It's simply not part of the implementation. So once you're hacked forever. The device needs to come back to base. So if your device is somewhere deployed in the field, 1,000 kilometers away, you have to physically send it back, reload your firmware, put new keys in, etc. LoRa doesn't support that. Now, how can we solve the fact that if we look at it, the LoRa communication is only secure up to a certain level? How can we make it secure and make sure that that security lasts forever? If this is the standard scenario of sending a network session key and an application session key and using that for communication, we believe we can make it truly secure by adding an extra security layer. If we add an extra security layer on top of this, using a public-private key encryption, so asymmetric, we can make sure that the payload is always encrypted using that third layer. And then, in fact, we don't care if the upper two layers are compromised. The final layer, the third layer, gives us the secure communication that we really want and that we really need. Now, how would this work? So we see this chain of devices that communicate over a gateway to an application server. We can use a Diffie-Hellman key exchange by using private-public key pairs to do our communication. That would work as follows. On the device, we generate a private and a public key. On the final destination, we also generate a private and a public key. So we've got keys A on the left side, keys B on the right side. And then we can exchange the public keys so that on each side, we have our own private key, the public key from the other side. And that key exchange can typically be done over the LoRa network. That's not a big deal. We send the keys because you need the private key and you need the public key jointly to generate a shared secret. And with your private key and the public key of the server, you can actually derive the same the same secret as you can derive on the server sides. So this would allow you to make a fully encrypted message exchange. Now, this is different from what we saw before. First of all, it's an end-to-end communication session. It's communication from the device to the final destination. So the LoRa network itself can do nothing with your message payload because it's encrypted throughout. But it's a mechanism that, in my opinion, can be made 100% secure. Now, some critics may ask, now what's the difference? Because once we've derived this shared secret, in fact, the shared secret is a symmetric key. And if somebody can steal the shared secret or can derive the shared secret, they can still look on the network and still listen to the payload and still decode your messages. The difference is that this key exchange process can, depending on how secure your network needs to be, can be repeated over and over and over again. You could, before every message that you want to send securely, you could do a key exchange first. Or you could do it once a day. Or you could exchange keys every time you think your server may have been compromised. So if indeed somebody hacks into the key store, steals all the keys, and you feel that your total fleet of deployed LoRa devices is no longer secure, just send a new public key from the server side, and you're in business and this communication is secure again. So if the server gets compromised, we can generate a new key pair. But how about the device side? Can we still break into the device, listen on the UART interface, steal the information or decode the embedded software, and get access to that shared secret? Now, that's again back to the point of the physical and secure endpoint. Yeah? So if the endpoint can be opened up, if we can steal the data, can we solve this? Now, this can be solved by making the private key inaccessible. The private key can be made inaccessible. The private key can be on the device, never leaving the device, by using a secure element. And the secure element is what we standard fitted on our Explorer. So that's where we get back to the point that Microchip asked us to put the ATAC 508 on there. We did it. We didn't realize at that stage yet why they wanted it to be fitted. But this chip has the capability to generate a private key, to store the public key from the server, and generate the shared secret for us. It's all done in the chip. And because the private key is generated in the chip, it cannot be retrieved from the chip. Even if you would do some surgical operation, if you let's say, take layer by layer by layer of the actual silicon, you will not be able to pull the private key out of this. So it's actually quite a nifty element. And yeah, like I said, it holds the private key, can generate a shared secret. There's a new version that has just come out of this chip, the ATAC 608, and that's what we're going to be fitting on the future iterations of our module, which can also do the AES encryption. So basically, it merges the public key with the private key, and with the ATAC 608, even the generated or the derived shared secret is not leaving the chip. So that way, it is, in my opinion, at least from the device side, totally secure. We tested and made this whole chain work. My colleague Gabriel Notman is in the microchip area, ready for you to see this whole chain working. So we've got the whole communication between a server and a device, encrypted, decrypted, the whole thing loaded, using this secure element. And of course, it is part of the Explorer board. The Explorer board has the chip. We have made the libraries available now to do all the steps that I've just described. So yeah, it can actually start doing this and maybe help improve the quality of this whole communication chain. So that's the 608, has the same footprint. So for us, it's really easy to load that on the new generation of our Explorer board. And yeah, we would truly advise you, for any designs that you are making, any LoRa products that you are making, just add one of these secure elements and you can make your device truly secure. Cost price of these chips in quantities is less than €1. So if you're rolling out a new batch of devices, it's well worth investing in this technology. Any questions?
Question over here.
Ja.
Microchip is a well-known...
Microphone, please.
Yeah,
There you go.
From my experience, microchip, or at least from what I've read, isn't well known for the security of the random number generators within the chips. Is the random number generator in this newest version more secure? So that we can actually guarantee that the private keys are actually not predictable.
Yeah, it is. One thing we should realize is that the microchip actually acquired Atmel, and this is an Atmel component. So I think with Atmel they brought in all the knowledge to actually make this a truly secure device.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this one is more random.
This one has a proper random generator. Yeah.
Yeah, over there. Hello.
Hello.
Where are you from?
Hey, thank you. This is Rosendo Bracamontes from Exitech. Just my question is related to the UART communication that you mentioned, and how the 508 devices actually communicate with the microcontroller. And what is the threat model that you have when somebody can actually put a logic analyzer and take a look at all the traffic that goes between the microcontroller and the 508 device? And the follow-up question, if it's not too much, is there any study or any assessment whether putting an external cryptographic device makes sense rather than use the trust zone in a different microcontroller?
Well, there's different approaches, and I'm not saying which one is the best approach, but for us, by having this cryptographic element, the most essential part of having the cryptographic element is that the keys are never exposed. So whatever you do, whatever you hook up, whatever logic analyzers, whatever sniffers you add to the device, you will never see the key, because you will never have access to the key. Now, with the ATAC 508, the keys are still used to create a shared secret, and that shared secret will then be exposed, so that poses a relative larger security threat than when you would use the ATAC 608, whereby all the compression takes, all the cryptographic processes take actually place in the chip. So you have your payload, you send the payload to the chip, and you get an AES 256 encrypted payload back, and that is what you deliver over the LoRa network. So the only way to decrypt this payload is if you have physical access to the device and physical access to the secure element, or you have access to the other side of the chain, the receiving server, and to the private public key pair on the receiving server. Well, if that form of mechanism is not secure, then none of the communication that we're all doing over the internet is secure.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Another question behind you. Hello.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Steve from Milan. Would it be possible, in your opinion, in theory, to dissolve the chip from the board and sold it to another one? Just to stealing the chip, would that compromise the security?
Yes. If you would steal the chip and fit it on another device, then you could access this chip to mimic this on another device.
Okay, so you can do it. One final question over here. Hello.
Thank you, Miran Rajšek from Solera Link Slovenia. So welcome. My question is very basic. How can we know that this new enhanced method of security does not extend the payload?
That's a good one. In principle, with AES, and I believe if the payload is longer than 16 bytes, you can encrypt it and keep the same payload length. What you often see is that they salt the payload, whereby it gets extended by a couple of bytes. So it depends on the available space that you have. Of course, with LoRa, we are limited to this 51 bytes. So if your payload is already a full 51 bytes, then you cannot make it as secure as you would be if your payload is much smaller and you can use the extra byte that the salting requires.
Yes. Okay, so time's up because we're all quite hungry.
Good.
And a final hand of applause for Willem Smeenk.
Thank you.